Okay, I am hoping that this works. Again, it doesn't look like... Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Oh, this is a terrible start. Can anyone hear me? You can hear me. Okay, fantastic. Phew. Okay, great. Lovely stuff. So welcome to version 2 of this program. I feel like I'm just going crazy. Okay, so thank you for joining me once again in this version here. And we are continuing developing our noughts and crosses application, okay? And developing being the key word. So development is all about not being perfect the first time. It's about just getting better and better as we go along. Now, I have updated my to-do list, and today we are going to be working on adding player information to the top of the screen. Now, the first thing that I would like to do is inside here, inside my... Oh dear, hang on. Let's get rid of that. Inside my... let's get rid of this file, actually. Inside my main file, okay, we've got this space class and we've got this game board class. And what I would like to do is I would like to hide it in a different file. So we're going to create a new file. The one I just deleted, I'm going to go through it again because I messed up the stream earlier. So we're going to gameboard.py, and we are going to take these classes, okay, so the space class and the game board class, we're going to cut them and Control X, and we're going to paste them into game boards. Now, it's going to kind of throw up some red lines here because it doesn't know what TK is anymore, okay? So what we're going to do is we are going to just import tkinter as TK at the top here so that it knows, so that this file knows what TK means, okay? And now it's happy, all these red lines have gone. Fantastic. So once you have copied that across, these two classes into this file, it's kind of tidied up our main file a lot more, right? Now, it has underlined this in our 4 lines of code that exists now. It has underlined game board. It's not happy. It doesn't know what it is, okay, because we've hidden it in this file. So we need to actually import that module, that library, that file, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to say import game board, okay? Now, it still doesn't know what it is because we need the game board class, so this class, inside the game board file. So we need to say gameboard equals gameboard dot gameboard. Now, can you see how important naming conventions are right now? Okay, I've got my pothole case, which is my variable. Okay, I've got my file name, which is all lowercase and no underscores. And then I've got my class name, which is all uppercase. And so at a glance, I can see which one is which, and sticking to these naming conventions is really important just for your sanity when you have something like this where you say gameboard equals gameboard.gameboard, and yeah, it's an odd one. Okay, fantastic. And we should just be able to run this and it will just work just like normal. Okay, that is fantastic. That is all good. And we can see here that we've got a grid of 9 squares here again. Let's just make this a little larger. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to add an area at the top for the player information. And I want you to think about the way that our noughts and crosses game is going to work as being like a session, right? So let's say me and Alice go into, it's always Alice in computer science examples. Let's say Bob and Alice, for computer science purity, they go into a game, right? And they're going to want to play a few games of noughts and crosses until one of them inevitably loses the will to live. And then what's going to happen is they're going to want to exit, right? And so we're going to want to keep that session going. They'll have lots of games within that session. And then they want to come out of that session. And then Bob might go and play Charlie and then Deirdre and then work his way through the alphabet. So we're going to kind of have that in the back of our minds as we're programming this. So really, I guess, we made a class for the game board. Why not make a class for the stats area as well? And what better name than stats area? So we're going to make a class and we're going to call it stats area. And this is going to be much like the game board class, right? It's going to have a bunch of content in it, and we're just essentially going to link it to the window. So we've made our window here, and then we pass that window into the game board, and we're going to do that the same with our stats area. So we're going to say class stats area. We're going to define the initialize function, so def init and we are going to give it the self, the all-important self inside. When we're working with classes, you've got to you've got to look after the self. Never forget the self is my top tip for working in an object-oriented fashion. And we also want to be given the window, right? We need to attach our frame to the window, and so we're going to do that here. Okay, fantastic. So what are some things that the stats area is going to need? Well, the stats area is going to need some players, right? We're going to need to know what the different player information is. So in fact, let's what should we do? Let's say create stats area. Let's say self dot, never forget self dot create stats area, and we're going to make a function that creates our stats area. And why, the reason I'm not just going to put the code in here, why I'm making a kind of function to do this, I'm going to make it down here, def create stats area. The reason I'm doing that is so that later on, when we're kind of getting more advanced and putting the kind of finishing touches in our initialize function is probably going to have a lot more code in it, and we just want to keep things simple, right? We want to know what's going on and keep it kind of compartmentalized. And so that's why I'm going to just pop this here, even though it might seem a little bit redundant right now. We're going to pass in the window when we call that function. And when we define that function, we are going to obviously remember the self, and we are going to expect to be given the window, okay? Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a frame to put all of our content inside. So we are going to say our frame is equal to tk.frame, and we need to pass the frame the window, okay? A frame is just a container for all of the little things we'll put in it, and then we'll give the frame to the window, and then the window will render the frames, and the frames will render their bits, and we end up with our noughts and crosses game. So we also want to add the frame to the grid. So we're going to say frame.grid, and we're going to say row equals 0, column equals 0, and sticky equals north, east, west, south, news. It just works. Now, there is going to be a clash here because we are also telling the game board that it should, where did I put it? Here, self.board. When we have a create board, okay, we say self.board.grid, and we also put that on row 0 and column 0. And that's going to mean they're both kind of overlapping, and it's not going to be very pretty. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop the game board to row 1, okay? In fact, what I think would be cleverer, what I think would be more clever is if we gave the game board a row, okay? So when we create the game board, if we give it a row and we say self.row equals row, okay? So when we, back in main, when we create this, we're going to add this in. We're going to give it a row, and we're going to say self.row equals row. And then here, where we say row equals, we're going to say self.row. Because then if we add in extra frames along the line, then we don't have to go into the classes and change it. We can just change it in the main function, okay? So I've added in this argument, this parameter here, row. We're going to set self.row equal to that row, and then we're going to use self.row down here when we attach the self.board to the grid. Now, if we jump into main, now when we say game board equals game board window, we're not just going to give it the window, we're also going to give it row 1, okay? And we're also going to have a stats area. So pothole case for this, stats area equals, and then we're going to say stats area, and we're going to pass it the window, and we will also pass it a row. So we'll pass it 0, and we will expect this area to be given a row. And then look, you can see already this initialize function is filling up fast. Not that fast. And we're going to say, just like we did in game board, okay, self.row equals row. So now we can pass in the row from the main function, and inevitably we'll move stats area out of the main function, and that will go somewhere else. And then in order to edit its position, maybe if we wanted to see what it would look like if it was below the game board rather than above it, we could kind of test that out and see. So down here, frame.grid, we're going to change this to self.row. Okay, lovely. And now all we have to do is change these numbers here if we want to manipulate where each one sits on the board, and we don't have to dive into the classes. Lovely stuff. Okay, so our actual stats area, what do we need to do? Well, we are going to need to create some labels, okay? So we are going to say tk.label, and it needs to be a capital L. We're going to say tk.label, and we're going to give it a few things. So we're going to tell it that its parent is the frame. We always start with the parent, so we're going to say the frame. We are then going to give it some text. Okay, now the different stats that we want, it's probably best if we put them in an array. Makes more sense. So we're going to say stats equals, and we are going to pop all of our stats into an array. So we're going to have player symbol. Actually, we should probably start with player name. I'm using an array because this will allow us to do a loop and create labels rather than have like 10 lines of labeling. So we're going to have player name. We're going to have player symbol. We're going to have status because we want to know whether it's their turn or whether they're waiting to have their turn. We are going to have, actually, I'm not going to put these colons in because we're going to format the end of this in the actual loop. Player name, player symbol, status. We're going to have wins. We're going to have losses, and we're going to also have draws. I'll put draws in the middle of those two, I think. Draws. Make sure each item in your array is separated by a comma. And that should be fine. Let's hide these files, give ourselves a bit more space. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to loop through these stats. So we're going to say for I in, do we want to say I? Yeah, we do want to say I. For I in range, the length of stats, so however long this array is, we are going to make a label. So we're going to say tk.label frame text equals, and our text is going to be equal to stats at position I. Okay, so I will start at 0, and then so it will select player name, then it'll be 1, so it will select player symbol, and so on and so forth until it's gone through all of them. Do we need anything else for our label? I don't think so at the moment. We can always add things in later. Now we can right off the back of that say .grid. And we are going to say that the row is equal to I. Okay. So it's going to start at 0, and then it's going to get larger and larger. So the row is going to go down, and we're going to say column equals 0. Okay, so we are creating the label and we're popping it in a grid at exactly the same time. Now we also need another label, but with this time we actually need some data, some actual information. So we need to create another label. So we need to say tk.label, and we need the actual value, right? So these are just like kind of describing what the information is, and then we need to put the actual information to the right of them. Also, text equals stats I, we're also just going to pop a plus here, and we're going to add a colon and a space just to format this nicely. So we're going to add another label. Its parent is also going to be the frame. It's text. We're not going to have text. We're going to have text variable equals. And at the moment, we don't have that information because we haven't created the players. And so maybe we should do that now. Ooh, maybe we should do that now. Yeah. I guess these kind of go hand in hand, right? So we're gonna pause right here. I'm gonna kind of put I'm just gonna write come back here in capitals, and maybe I'll comment it out. Okay, I will not forget to come back here. So we will finish this off in a second. First, what we'll do is we'll make a class for the players. Okay, once we understand how a player looks in our game, then we can start adding in the actual stats for the players. So when we make a player, this is the great thing about programming, because you're just making it up as you go along, and it's fantastic. So when we make a player, we don't want the window, because we're not actually rendering anything to the window. What we do want is a name, okay? And if we're not given a name, I'm going to give a default name as Bob, okay? So if something goes wrong in our code, Bob will get given a name. We also want to be given a symbol, okay? Because we need to tell the players what symbol they are, yeah? We're not going to automatically assign that, because actually they they can't both be the same, okay? It's all right if two Bobs play against each other, but they both can't be crosses, otherwise the game doesn't work. So we're actually gonna say self, comma, symbol, comma, name equals Bob, okay? And we are going to list a bunch of properties for this player. So we're gonna say self.name equals, no string, we're gonna say self.name equals name. We're gonna say self.symbol equals symbol. We're going to say, now, here's what we want. We want I guess we want a dictionary. I think we use the dictionary in the password manager. So we're going to say self.stats, and we're going to set that equal to, and then we're going to use curly brackets, right? Dictionary is just like an array, but instead of having numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3 to indicate the positions, we can use strings to determine what they are. So I can say, and we're going to use these stats down here, right? So we're going to have name. Actually, no, we're going to have player name. We're going to have, so player name is equal to self.name. Easy. And I'm going to put a comma. The next is I guess we don't really need the name, do we? That's silly, because I'm already storing it. That's silly. But we are going to have wins. We are going to have draws. And we are going to have losses. I'm sorry, I'm programming this downwards rather than across, which is really silly. So each of those lines needs a colon, and we're going to set that to tk.intvar. Okay, and what this will do is it will create a way for us to update our variables when they change inside the actual user interface. So all of these are going to be tk.intvar. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to set all of our stats, so our wins, our draws, our losses, to 0, because at the moment they are intvar, but they're not actually, that's not a thing. That's not a number. We haven't set anything. So what we're going to say is we're going to write a function called reset stats, and this will be really helpful for when we refresh the game as well. So this will probably be reusable. So we're going to say def reset stats. We need to pass in the self. And we are going to say for key in self.stats. And when we're working with dictionary, this here on the left, so wins, draws, losses, these on the left-hand side of the colon here, they are referred to as keys. This is a key, and this helps us to find this specific value. Okay, so these are key value pairs. Wins is a key, and the tk.intvar is the value. Now, I've forgotten to put commas after the end of these, so make sure you put your commas in, make sure you've got your colons, and that is our dictionary. So we're going to say for key in self.stats, key is going to start, it's going to be wins, and then key will go to the next key, which will be draws, and then key will be losses at the end. We are going to say self.stats and we want, not K, we want the key. So whatever's at that key at that point in time, we are going to say dot set, and we're going to set it to 0. Okay, so this is dot set is a special kind of thing that we can do with a int var or a string var. We can set their status. So we're going to go through these and we're going to set them all to 0. We've got our name, we've got our symbol. We also want our status. So self.status, and we are going to set that equal. What we're going to set it equal to? We're going to set it equal to waiting. Okay. When we start the game, before the game has started, both players are technically waiting until we say start and we assign one of the players, okay, it's your turn. Okay. And obviously this will allow us to allow Bob to go first and then allow Alice to go first and so on and so forth. Okay, fantastic. So we've got a player and they have a name, a symbol, status, and they also have stats. I've realized how similar status and stats look, and I apologize for that. We're going to say def. We're going to make some things here. Actually, our status needs to be a string var. So instead of waiting, let's cut that. We are going to say tk.string var, because this is actually a variable, isn't it? This is going to change. The symbol we're going to keep the same. Okay, so when we assign the players, you're always going to be crosses or you're always going to be noughts, okay, until you start a brand new session, and then that could change. So we're going to say def set status, we're going to give it the self, and we're also going to give it a status. And this will allow us to set the status in the actual game of the player as well. And so what we're going to say is we're going to say self.status.set, because it's a string var, we can use .set, and we are going to say waiting. Okay? No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're going to say status. Okay, so we're gonna whatever the status is that we use, we're gonna pass that in. Now, the reason I'm not just saying self, this is only one line of code. Like, why put it in a function? Because if we wanted to change how we implement that, how we change the status, it won't affect the other parts of the program when we use it in other parts of the program. So we're gonna. It's kind of like a best practice to do this kind of thing. So once we've made the status, we can then say self.setStatus, and we're going to set it to waiting. And then later on in the game, we can set one of them to my turn. Okay, fantastic. So we've got our player. We can reset their stats. In fact, once we've made their stats, we should reset their stats. So we're going to say self.resetStats, and that will set them all to 0. Ready to go. Okay, so when we make a new player, they start with zeros. They don't start with 100 wins in their pocket. This is all looking good. So now what we're going to do is we are going to come back to where I said come back here. So we need to be given the players when we create our stats area, really, don't we? So we need to ask for the players. So I'm going to, as well as asking for a window and a row, I'm going to ask for the players. And this is just going to be a list of 2 players, right? Okay, that's fine. So now what we need to do is we need to go through each player. I'm thinking, actually, in our stats, it makes more sense to have all of our stuff in here, and then this loop down here will work really nicely, be much more succinct, and we won't need this array. Decisions. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's come down here and let's say status, and we're going to set that to tk.stringvar. And then down here where we set the status, instead of saying self.status.set, we're going to say self.stats. Sorry, that's quite at the bottom of the screen there. Self.stats at position status.set. Okay, and so this will still work, but we want to actually take this down here. We can get rid of self.status because it's stored in the stats. We're also going to do the same with the symbol and the name. Okay, I think if it's all bundled up in stats, when we actually print those stats to the screen, it's just going to be much easier, and you will see that in a second in the code. So we will also have our symbol, and that is going to be just whatever symbol we pass in, and we're also going to have our name. Colon, and then we're going to have name. And don't forget your commas at the end here. Okay, lovely. And so we're going to get rid of self.name, self.symbol, okay? And they're going to be in here. So now we've just got one big dictionary with all of these, okay? Now, we have this reset stats thing, and we're saying for key in stats, self.stats key.set. Now this won't work on player and symbol because they're not string vars or int vars, okay? And so it's not gonna like it. String vars also not gonna like it because we're passing it an integer. So we just need to put in a simple if here. So we are gonna what are we going to do? We're going to have a array of valid keys. Valid keys. We're going to set that equal to wins, draws, and losses. Wins, draws, and losses. And we are going to say if key in valid keys, then we're going to allow this to be set to 0. Okay, so this is just going to prevent us trying to set something that can't be set to 0. And then we can update this if we ever needed to. We could update this with other string vars as well. Okay, fantastic. Unfortunately, I've got key here and key. Oh, how to do that? We've got key here and key here. This is not good. So I'm going to say for valid key in valid keys. No, if valid. Oh no, wait. Sorry, no, that's right. If key. Sorry, I thought that was a for loop. If key is in valid keys. Said the word keys so many times. Then we're going to set that. I hope that makes sense to you. I wrote it and I'm struggling to get my head around it. So we're going to go through each key in this stats. Okay, so player, symbol, status, wins, draws, losses. Okay, and if that key, so if player is in this array, player's not, okay, then we're just going to ignore it because it's not. But if this key wins is, yep, it is, it's here, then we're going to do this. We're going to say, okay, set it to 0. Okay, lovely. So we're going to reset the stats there. We then set the status to waiting, and our player is created. So let's create 2 players. So we're going to say player 1, and this is where objects-oriented programming really kind of starts to shine here. So we're going to say player 1 equals player. Okay, and we need to give our player a symbol and a name. So I'm going to give my first player the symbol of X, and I'm going to call them Alice. And then we can copy that, and I'm going to say player 2 equals player, and we're going to give them the noughts, okay, that symbol. And if I don't give them a name, they will default to Bob. Now, as we advance this, we're going to actually allow the user to type in their name, but we don't have that screen yet. So we'll just sit tight here, and we will just kind of use Alice and Bob for now for testing purposes. So our players is equal to an array with player 1 and player 2 in it, right? So they are our players of the game. And then our stats area, we pass in the row that we want it to go to. And we also, the last thing we pass in is the players. So we're going to give it our array of players. Okay, lovely. So we've created 2 players here by reusing this class, okay? And each player will be given their own set of stats that we can access and change as the program goes on. Each player, oh, this is wrong. How have I managed that? Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. Each player will know how to reset their stats, so we can reset the stats of each player as we go along. And we can also set the status, so we can change whether it's their turn or whether they're waiting for someone else to take their turn. So we've got that all set up. So that's our player. I'm just going to minimize that, close it down a little bit so we've got some room to work with. So we're passing in those players. And so now we can come back to our stats area. Okay, so we've created Alice and Bob, bundled them up in an array, and then we are passing them in here when we're creating our stats area. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do this little bit of magic where it should all just work. So when we create the stats area, we are going to pass in that player's array. Ooh, are we? Are we? I don't think we are, actually. I think what we're going to do is we're going to store the players in our stats area. So we're going to say self.players equals players, okay? And then that's stored. Now, the really nice thing about when we pass in this player 1 and player 2, it's not like a photograph. It's not like a snapshot in time of what that looks like. It's a reference to where that lives, okay? And so each time Python kind of goes to look at a value, it's not like taking a copy of that and that's the value it currently is. It's going back to the source each time to just get the value. And so even though we're passing them in right when we create the stats area, even a few games on, the players will still kind of update and it will still be relevant and current to what's going on. So that will just work. It will just work. Fingers crossed. Okay, fantastic. So now what we can do is we can get rid of this stats array. Okay, that's out of here. So we're going to say for player in players, self.players. So for each player in our players, stick with me here, stick with me. Now this is going to get wild quite quickly here. So I'm just going to try and kind of space this out and take my time with this. So for each player in our self.players array, we're going to go through and we're going to create a stats thing. Okay. Now we're going to set our column. Let's just call it col. No, let's call it column. Column equals 0. Okay. And then right at the end of this for player in self.players, we're going to say column plus equals 1. And what this means is that we'll have one player kind of here with their stats, and then we'll move along and put our next player there. So our column is going to be equal to column. Okay, so we can position this nicely. Okay, fantastic. So rather than saying for I in range len stats, what we're going to do is we're going to say for key in player dot stats. Okay, so each player will have a dot stats. So we just made it up here, this dictionary. Okay, self dot stats. So you can say player dot stats, and we can access all of these keys. Okay, now what we can do with them is we can print them out. So we can say in this first label is just information. And then the second label, this is data. Or is it the other way around? I'm going to call this an information label. And I'm going to call this real-time data. Okay, real-time data. So one of them is just saying name. Okay, and then the other one's saying Bob or Alice. Okay, that's what these kind of the difference between these two are. So we're going to, instead of printing stats I here, so in our label text equals stats I, we're going to say text equals key. So for each key in player.stats, key will start at player, and so we'll print out player. In fact, what we should do is probably say player name, right? We will run this code eventually. It's really bad. I really don't like it when people don't run their code for ages, but I'm the biggest hypocrite. We're almost there though. We're almost there. So we've got our text equals our key. We're going to add a colon at the end, and that's fine. Okay. Now our text variable is going to be what's it going to be? I guess really. I guess actually, let's go back to the player here, okay? Because what I want to do is what I want to say here is I want to say text variable equals player dot stats at whatever key we're at, and we want to dot get that stat, right? Because it's a string var, because it's an int var, we need to use dot get. Okay, we can't just say player stats because it will just be like, oh, this is an int var, and it will just give you some big like nasty object. But we're like, what is that variable? We want that value, so we want to get it. Okay, so we're going to say dot get. Now the problem is this is going to work for this string var and these three int vars, but it's not going to work for name and symbol because they're not string vars. So what we're going to do is we are going to initialize player name and symbol as string vars. Okay, and that just means that I've put a capital T down here. Whoops. That just means that this will just work. Okay, and we love it when things just work. So we're going to say tk.string var. And we are going to say dot set, and I think I can get away with this and just pop in symbol here, and it will just be happy. Yeah, great, fantastic. And we do the same with player name. We're going to say tk.stringvar dot set, and we're going to pop in the name. Okay, and so we're creating the string. Oh, I need to put the brackets there as well. We're creating the string var, and then we're immediately setting it to what it is. And then we can get that from the stats as many times as we like. Okay, it's just going to make programming this a little bit easier. Okay, fantastic. This is all great. So now down here, we can see that I'm going to get rid of come back here because I have come back here now. So our text variable equals that. Now we're going to say dot grid. And we're going to put this on the same row as our label, right? We're saying wins, and then we've got a number, so 5, okay? We want that wins and that 5 to be on the same row. So we're going to say row equals I. I is gone. I is out of here. So I was in the before times. We've since developed this. We've since built on it. So we need to actually keep track of our row ourselves. So actually not up here, but down here, we need to say row equals 0. And we're going to make our own budget for loop. So row equals 0 down here. And then when we come back up to the top for the next player, we'll reset row to 0 so that then it starts at the top again. And every time we go through here and do this, we're going to say row plus equals 1. Okay. And so we're just going to keep going down the rows. And then we're going to say row equals row. Oh, column equals column. Oh, it's beautiful code. Row equals row. Couldn't agree more. Okay, and we're going to say here column equals, now we don't want them both overlapping, so we're going to say whatever the column is plus 1, okay? Because we want our label on one side and we want our data on the other. Does this just work? Does this just work? Here's our moment of truth. Let's run this and see if it just works. No, of course it doesn't work. Key error status. I've put a capital letter, haven't I? Absolutely. So in here, in my set status function in the player, I have said set status, and I've put a lowercase s like a fool. So I just need to update that to a capital S. That was in our set status method within our player. Just got the capitalization wrong on that. Okay, none type has no object get. Okay, let's have a look. What line are we on? Line 44. I knew there would be errors. I knew it. Okay, player.stats key.get. Okay. None type. Why are you of none type? Oh no, it was all going so well. Text variable equals player.stats at the key that we're in, and we want to get that key. Okay, we created the players. That's fine. We passed those players in. These have been reset. Status. No, they're set. Maybe this dot set isn't working correctly. Actually, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll print out the key. So we'll see which key it is that it's failing on. So I'm going to say print key up here at the top. And so we'll just see which one it gets to before it crashes. Let's have a look. Will it get there at all? Come on, internet, you can do it. Just make this a bit larger while we are debugging this. Okay, player name. Okay, so it's having a problem with this. So what we'll do is we'll set this down here. So we'll say self.stats set name, and we'll pop in player name, and we'll also do the same with symbol. I don't know whether this is the issue, but we'll have a look. I should have been doing little and often testing this, but hey ho, live and learn. Okay, so we're going to get rid of .set here. So our player name is tk.stringvar. And then we're setting them down here. We're resetting the stats. We're setting the status. That should all just work. Let's see, does that have the same? Okay, great. Okay, that's why it wasn't happy with that. That's fine. That has sorted. I'm going to get rid of this print line now. It's not too happy with displaying me anything though. It'd be lovely to see what this looks like now. Maybe that's too much to ask though. I'm just going to refresh my page. It seems like repl.it is having a little bit of a moment. Okay, hooray! Okay, fantastic. It's kind of working. It's kind of there. Now, it's looking a little bit off, but that's okay. That's okay. So what I've done is I've said column plus equals 1 here. Okay, but obviously we're putting the label and then the data. We're putting the label in column, and then we're putting the data in column plus 1. And then we're adding 1 to column, so we're going to 1. And then we're overwriting the next player's label with the first player's data, if you see what I mean. So what we need to do down here in our loop, right at the bottom of our for-player in self.players loop, down here where we're saying column plus equals 1, we're going to do column plus equals 2. Okay, simple as that. And now what we should see is why we should see something, but we don't. But that's okay. Now, one thing I would like to do is I would like to sticky these things here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell my label, let's get rid of this. I'd like to tell my label to actually stick to the northeast. I'd like it to stick to the east side of the thing here. So we're going to say sticky equals, and I'm going to say E. And you should notice that all of these here, all of these labels actually snap to the right-hand side now. Let's have a look and see if that works. Yeah, can you see that? Can you see how they've aligned? That's much nicer. So that's kind of the sticky in action and how you can kind of use that to align things. Just makes it look a lot nicer. And what we're also going to do is we're going to say on this label here, we are going to, oh no, I don't need to get it, do I? I'm a dingus. We're using the string var because we don't get it. We just say equals player.stats key, and that will sync it up with the string var, and everything will just work. Okay, so big point there. This is something that really confused me with Tkinter for a long time. Okay, so we're just going to point it in the direction of our string var. So we're going to say player.stats key in our text variable. And now if I run this again, look at this. Look at this. It's just populated with data. How cool is that? Not very. Yeah, fair enough. Now, if you want, do you know what? Just need to take a moment. Don't you just love it when it works? Oh, if you wanted to play with the formatting here, you might think about maybe saying that this label here, so with Alice X weighting 000, we might add in a sticky on the west so that it lines up nicely in the middle. So we might do that and see how that looks. So sticky equals, and we're doing this when we're telling it to be in the grid. Okay, so you can see here we've got the .grid function that we're running. Okay, and I've told this information label to be stuck to the east. I'm going to tell this real-time data label to be stuck to the west. And now if I stop and run this, there we go. They're nicely lined up. Okay, so we've got all of our information nicely lined up there. And I could also, if I wanted to, add in like a width into the label, if I wanted to make it bigger and give it more space. But we can kind of think about that later. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a title. So I'm just going to copy one of these lines and I'm going to pop it up here. I'm going to say TK label, and I'm just going to say text equals, let's say stats. Oh, let's put it as a string. Text equals stats. We're going to put it in the grid. We're going to put it on row 0, column. We're going to put it in column 0, but we're going to give it a column span of 4. Okay, so it spans all the columns. We're going to have no sticky. We'll just let it be. And this means because we're putting it on row 0, we're just going to update, we're going to push all the other rows down. Now, luckily, because we've just got this one row variable here, we can literally just set it to start at 1 rather than 0. And now when I run this, I should have a nice little title. It's centered in the middle there because I've given it the column span of 4. And I've now got my little stats area. Okay, fantastic. So in our release notes, let's add version 0.2. And we created the stats area. And we created the player class. And we linked stats, states, stats area, and player class together. Okay, fantastic. So I think we're about ready to start getting some gameplay in here now. So next version, version 3, we will start actually looking at how we can click buttons and make something actually happen in this game. Thank you for developing along with me. I hope this has been bearable. I hope you've enjoyed it somewhat and you've learned something, and I hope to see you in the next version. But until then, take care for now. Bye.